Hello, everyone. Welcome back to X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. My name is Miles, and I'm back once again with one of our esteemed regular guests. When someone returns here, you know two things. First, they clearly have a lot of valuable insights to share, and second, we clearly enjoy having them around. Over the years, this guest has helped organizations across industries look at business a little differently through the lens of people, principles, governance, and continuous improvement. He's been a strong advocate for something many businesses overlook: the idea that your people are your most valuable strategic asset. And today we're diving into a topic that many organizations think they understand, but often don't fully use to their advantage: SWOT analysis. More specifically, how organizations can turn a simple SWOT exercise into a real strategic advantage using self assessment, people engagement, governance frameworks, and continuous improvement. Here's Ian Erskine, the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, who has been guiding organizations around the world through these ideas for so many years. Happy to have you back, Ian. Hi.
Hi, Miles, and welcome to all our lovely viewers. And once again, I trust that you had a wonderful weekend. And
Yes, I did.
Miles has been telling me there's a long weekend over in Mexico, so she's been making good use of that extra day. And yes, so no, all good. And look, this is such an important topic. It's so pertinent right now because so many things are actually changing, and the world is actually changing as we speak. And I think that's the interesting point where before you can even do a SWOT analysis, you've actually got to turn around or have a good look at your organizational context. Now, it it really shot home to me. It has really shot home to me over the last couple of weeks in reference to the war in the Middle East, in the fact that, in actual fact, our business context, ACI Global's business context, is changing. So our SWOT analysis now needs to change. Our pestle needs now to be changed. And whilst I mean change, we have the key topics there, but we now need to discuss that in the context of our business. And truly, where we're heading to there is we're looking at a true understanding of foreseeable and unforeseen risks, right?
Mhm.
Now, if we just dwell on this for a little bit, when we talk about unforeseen risk, there's a lot of people in the world today saying, oh, we didn't see this coming, this was never going to happen, this, and so things like that, where in actual fact, this has been coming to a head for 40 plus years, nearly 47 years. And now it's happened. And that now means that that unforeseen risk now has become a foreseeable risk,
Ah,
which now has to be attended to in the business context by looking at your pestle, looking at your SWOT analysis,
mhm.
right? Now, and when we look at the pestle talks about political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental, right? Those whole, each one of those needs to be looked at the context within the business, needs to be looked at within the context of the SWOT analysis, and needs to now be reassessed because things have changed dramatically, right? Even again, going back to ACI Global, I didn't think twice about hopping in the car and driving for nearly 1.5 hours or 2 hours to get into the city. Well, now with price of fuel has doubled in Australia. We
Ah,
have shortages, right? And there's long lines at all the service stations. So I've now got to think, well, hold on, I need to now reconsider. Maybe I can do things at home in the home office, or maybe I need to hop on the train more often. And even that's a little bit fraught with danger because we have some of our trains are run on diesel oil, and that's
mhm.
now running low.
Yeah.
So, with all this now is impacting on myself and ACI Global's business, right?
Mhm.
And this then takes us having a look at the actual strengths and weaknesses of the organisation's people. Now, I've
Yeah.
just given you an example of how I've had to change. So, again, within each business context, that's now going to change for people all around particularly Australia, but all around the world, because
Mm-hmm.
there will be some people that simply will not be able to afford to travel. Just simply
Right.
traveling to work
Mm-hmm.
may well become a serious issue. So this is again, this is a wonderful, wonderful way to start this off, because it's just not a SWOT analysis that you've got to look at, right?
Yeah.
Hanging into the SWOT analysis is your PESTEL, is your strategic business plan, right? How, and I say to myself, for ACI Global, how is this actually going to change us? Now, we're lucky in a lot of respects because we're robust enough that, because we have things like the global dial where anyone can pick up the phone around the world at any time of the day and speak to someone in reference to ACI Global. We've
Mm-hmm.
already got that in place,
Right.
right? But look, if I then look at my auditing clients, where I've been travelling to them by car, there's going to have to be a little bit of a rethink about some of those, because
Mm-hmm.
the expense of doing that is quite astronomical.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we introduce the SWOT analysis and emphasize that the SWOT analysis, like the PESTEL and all these tools that we use, are like moving canvases. They're
Mm-hmm.
just not a single static and stay there. They have to be reassessed as we move forward.
What a great way to kick this off. It's always great catching up with you. And, Ian was supposed to be on a vacation today, but this is nothing compared to a vacation. But we're grateful you're here, Ian. So today we're talking about something every business leader has probably seen in a strategy meeting at some point, the famous SWOT analysis, as you said. And you often remind us when it's done properly, it can become much more than just a four-box exercise. So let's hear more how it could help organizations build strategic advantage, strengthen governance, and support their duty of care to their people and stakeholders. Because we hear the term SWOT analysis all the time in business strategy conversations. But from your perspective at ACI Global, Ian, could you tell us what a meaningful SWOT actually looks like when an organization is trying to create a real strategic advantage rather than, just simply filling out another management worksheet?
Yeah, well, see, this is very important to understand that, because um, if you look at this process, as I said, it ties into quite a few of the other processes and tools an organisation has. But again, this is where we have to understand that it has to be people focused. And key to this is understanding primary duty of care, and more importantly, each of our chain of responsibility. So within an organisation, that's looked at in reference to, okay, so who do I actually answer to above? Right? So that's a chain of responsibility of a single person going upwards, but it also goes down. So that employee may influence and direct employees below them. So that's part of their chain of responsibility as well. And
Mm-hmm.
this is one that is often not really looked at well within a business. The chain of responsibility is just so critical, and again, it has to be a moving canvas, because roles and key performance targets will change according to the context of the business and the effect of outside influences
Mm-hmm.
happening within that business. So, this is why, again, as we spoke earlier, in reference to, it's so important to not just do a SWOT analysis once a year or do a PESTEL once a year. It needs to be done on a moving basis. So this is where your business review comes in, your
Mm-hmm.
strategic planning comes in, and now this is now being talked quite seriously by lots of sections of our society, particularly the farming sector,
Mm-hmm.
which now literally is running out of fuel. Now it's so critical for Australia that that cannot happen, because we're now heading into the seeding phase where the farmers sow their seeds, they sow their grains, oats, barley, wheat, lucerne, and all these. This is their peak sowing season, right? Now, it was interesting. I rang a very good friend of mine, actually, one of my best friends. He was one of my groomsmen at our wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first questions I asked him was, are you right for seeding? And he said, well, at this stage we are. We've got over nearly 10,000 litres of diesel fuel, right? Now, that in itself seems a lot, but it's not. As Ken said, that will we feel we have enough to see us through seeding, right? And but there are lots of farmers and lots of agricultural producers that are not in such a fortunate position because some of them don't have that ability to store a significant amount of fuel on their properties.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this comes back, and this is something that Ken and I actually discussed when we actually went to college together many years ago, and they were looking at how they could future-proof their operations even in those days. So Ken's father was very much a forward thinker, strategic planning, looked at his strengths and his weaknesses, turned those into opportunities for improvement and things like that. And this is why it becomes so important. But just going back to what I originally said in reference to primary duty of care and chain of responsibility, this also boils down to a fact of rule of law and having a true understanding of the ramifications of if we do stray into that grey area between right and wrong. So we have to be very careful not to push people beyond their capabilities. As I said before, with the chain of responsibility, up and down works both ways. And again, this is where you have to have within your organisation a philosophy where people can openly talk to each other and
Mm-hmm.
discuss issues. And and again, this I become a little bit frustrated with the modern society is that there seems to be this notion if you say something that may slightly offend or put people off, all of a sudden people on the opposite side throw their hands in the air and walk away. We have to have an understanding that we're all different. We have to be able to talk through issues. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's very important in today's society in reference to what's happening in the Middle East. We have to be open. We have to have the ability to be talk freely amongst ourselves and discuss the what if scenarios. Okay, the
Mm-hmm.
unforeseen risks that we ourselves are going to face. And for argument's sake, someone said to me the other day, he said, Ian, it's just not a simple matter of you hopping on a train because when you arrive in Sydney or even when you're leaving from Newcastle to come through to Sydney, we have pockets of people that want to do harm.
Uh-huh.
And it's not going to be the first time. We have had situations where people have hopped on a train to do people damage. And that's the situation that we're all working. So again, we're going back to a situation where you actually talk about yourself personally doing a
Mm-hmm.
SWOT analysis. And
Yeah.
this is what I say to people. Sometimes people get a little bit misunderstanding of what a SWOT analysis actually is. And I give them the analogy of if you're walking up the street, there's cars moving left and right and everywhere. You're not in a position where you can get to a zebra crossing and walk across the street. So you look to the left, you look to the right. Or there's a car, maybe 50, 60 meters away. There's no one coming the other way. So you're actually doing a SWOT analysis, right? And then you
Yeah.
decide to walk across the street. And it has happened to me many times. Started to walk and I realized, wow, I didn't judge that distance very quickly. So you
Yeah.
have to run across the street to get across the street.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying there is a SWOT analysis, and this is my challenge to everyone today. Start to actually physically and memory, get your mind thinking to actually actively do this SWOT analysis when you're
Mm-hmm.
doing little tasks, because that then will become a true positive and a strategic advantage for an organization, because basically that's what we're talking about with the SWOT analysis. If you do a SWOT analysis on an ongoing basis, tie it to your pastorals, your strategic business planning, your business reviews, you will have a strategic advantage over your competitors.
Mm-hmm. And what a good analogy. And that's a really good way to frame it because a lot of organizations, Ian, treat it like a one time planning activity, when in reality, it's a powerful assessment tool, as you said, that can guide decision making across entire organization. So, building on that, once an organization has identified its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, how should leaders connect those insights to something practical, like their enterprise risk management framework, their due diligence and governance framework, or even their broader duty of care to employees and stakeholders.
Well, see, this, as I said, this comes back to the SWOT analysis is just not a simple individual tool because the SWOT analysis can't work by itself. SWOT analysis has to work from the individual themselves,
Mm-hmm.
their own responsibilities, their own accountabilities. Again, we talk about the chain of responsibility,
Uh-huh.
and all this. And so you really do need to have that framework in place. But again, this comes back to something I often say to people. Do you truly understand the meaning of foreseeable and unforeseen risk? And this is what I was saying before. This is where we now have to actively challenge ourselves to be in a position to look for the what if scenarios. You know,
Yeah.
driving up the highway, what will be the situation if I end up with a blown tire?
Mm-hmm.
Or what happens in a situation if some lunatic comes roaring up the road and cuts me off?
Mm-hmm.
And this came up the other day when I was talking to people in reference to training national heavy vehicle drivers. And we've got a situation at the moment where we've got a serious increase in incidents, and we're trying to work out what the actual cause of that is. Now, one of the situations that's come across my desk is that the trainee actually now, they're now cutting corners, and where what normally happens or should happen is there needs to be a verification process in that training of the driver. For argument's sake, when they're driving a liquid petroleum gas tanker,
Uh-huh.
people have to understand that, when you're passing that tanker with a caravan or something like that, you can't just, when you get past and swerve back in, because
Yes.
that forces the driver into a situation where he's clearly, again, they've got to do a SWOT analysis. Wow, I can't brake heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I can't steer hard to the left or hard to the right.
Yeah.
Because if I do that, the tank's going to go one way, I'm going to go the other. So you're put into a situation. And again, this is where, again, we've talked about it before, primary duty of care. People on the roads have to understand there's other users on the roads. So
Yes.
their actions, which might be careless and not thinking, will have a flow-on effect of serious incidents. And this is what we're saying here is that where your enterprise risk management framework, your governance process has to be spot on right at the very start of when an employee starts working for you, or even as the employees begin to step up their ladder to take on
Mm-hmm.
another role. It's an ongoing process at all the time that we've
Yeah.
got to continually look at our strategic and enterprise risk management framework, our governance. And again, going back to what we've said on many, many occasions, it's all about people. If we don't get that right with our people,
Yeah.
basically the whole thing will come off the rails.
Mm-hmm. And I'm unconsciously doing SWOT analysis even at home. Like about my kid when he's doing his homework. I mean, it's just the same as in organizations when those insights actually feed into a structured risk management and governance approach. It moves SWOT from theory into real operational value. And one thing you also talk about often is the importance of recognizing, as you said in the beginning, both foreseeable and unforeseen risk. When organizations conduct a SWOT or internal self assessment, like what we discussed during our last episode, where do you typically see them underestimate risk or miss warning signs that could affect their long term resilience?
Well, yes. So this goes back to what you're just saying there, a true understanding of foreseeable and unforeseen risk. And this is where it's very important to understand and for everyone to come to terms with change. Change is not a simple thing for us as humans because basically we as humans get ourselves into a pattern of behavior, a routine, and we like to stay there. Now that's where I often look back and virtually, and it happens literally every time I go into an organisation.
Mm-hmm.
I turn and I look at people, and quite often they say, "Oh, there's lots of changes happening and things like that." And I often bring people back to what I always use. And this is something that's very real to myself and Loretta and our family in reference to when we were in the milk industry. There were big changes in the milk industry, and we were actually suffering serious downturns, losing clients and things like that. And our bank manager came down the road, and I said to Loretta, look, I can't talk to him right now because we were under the pump.
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, he said, look, I only need 15 minutes of your time. When you knock off, just come up into my office. So we did. So we went up into his office, and he had a little book on his table. And I sat down, and he looked at me and he said, yes, you don't look at it like that, Ian. And he said, it's a little book called Who Moved My Cheese?
Ah,
And
yeah.
it's all about change. Now,
Uh-huh.
that key word, which he said to me at that very point of time, rang loud and clear because we were fighting the change. We had nothing in our power where we could change it, right? We had to do something, we had to change. So I read that book that night and we put changes into play and we turned our business from a single milk truck to a double milk truck, two milk
Mm-hmm.
trucks, right? And we left the business in far better shape than it was even before we bought it and we'd
Oh,
taken that shot. So what I'm saying to people is in a business, get everyone, every single employee should read this little book, Spencer J. Johnson, right? Who Moved My Cheese? It's about two little people and two mice. And you probably can guess what the story is, right?
yeah.
The people moved out of the house, okay? So there weren't any scraps for the mice to eat, okay? One of them thought for himself, oh, I'm absolutely starving. So he said, oh, I'm going to have to go for a bit of a waltz somewhere to have a look. No, 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 you can't. You've got to stay here. And he was very firm. Little mice went on his way. And he came back a little bit later and he said to his little friend, he said, no, 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 we've got to move. There's a far better place where there's lots and lots of food. And but again, that's the story. So we have to be prepared to understand change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, going back to what I'm saying now in reference to the Middle East, where there is serious oil restrictions, diesel oil for farmers to put in their tractors and for truck drivers to put in their trucks to cart the food to the supermarkets for people to go and buy. We have serious issues here. And now I'm openly saying now we have to look at how we change that and bulletproof not only our organisations, but we actually, in fact, have to bulletproof our societies so that we are robust enough so that we can meet this challenge that's coming to us. And again, this is something where this works in with your SWOT analysis. If you understand the risk and understand, wow, okay, there it is. Yeah, but I don't really want to change. I'm fixed in my ways. We're going to have to change.
Good point. And we really have to learn how to stop fearing what lies ahead and instead thrive in an environment of change and uncertainty, especially today where businesses face constant change. I mean, in life in general, sometimes it's not the obvious threats that cause problems, it's the risk organizations didn't pause to think about. And that brings us to something you've championed for years, Ian. And I'm sure the audience know that for a fact already. The idea that people are the organization's most valuable resource. How does building a strong culture around competence management, behavior disciplines, and continuous professional development or CPD turn a simple SWOT exercise into something that truly strengthens people engagement and capability?
Well, this is like competence management and the framework that you put in place.
Mhm.
And it's all tied to people's behaviour disciplines. And we tie this into continuous professional development and ACI. And that's basically mirrored and should be mirrored exactly into your SWOT analysis. And it's something that we all need to constantly work at. And in that way, our weaknesses will be worked on and moved to opportunities for improvement. And ultimately, this is where we drive high achievers within the workforce. So again, it's going back to a person on the shop room floor, going from one machine to another, and he takes two paces. He said, oh my goodness, Joe's left a lead on the floor. Don't just step over it and walk further. Stop, pick the lead up, put it back onto its harness, and you then, as you walk past Joe, simply say, Joe, remember to put the lead on the frame, and things like that. So it's all our responsibility, which leads back to capability, leads back to skill, leads back to the ability of someone to be able to see a weakness or see a threat and they fix it. So this is tied to your capabilities. And this is where we drive high achievers, and this ensures the organisation is achieving sustained success on an ever increasing arrow up.
Mhm. And I really like that perspective, Ian. When organizations focus on people development and people engagement, SWOT becomes part of a broader culture value creation strategy. And finally, if an organization genuinely commits to self assessment, accelerating continuous improvement, and the principles behind ACI Global's primary duty of care, how does that mindset ultimately transform SWOT from a static planning exercise into a living strategy that drives sustainable value creation and, of course, long term success?
Yes, it's brilliant, isn't it? So this is actually where we've been leading from the very start to the finish of this podcast. Because yes, the SWOT analysis is an ongoing tool. The SWOT analysis is being done by individuals every second of the day.
Mhm.
And this is oh so important. And this is why we have to adhere to our core beliefs and principles. And we must never sway into that grey area. We always have to be striving to do the right thing. And when you think about it, this is how we're achieving a firm belief in ongoing continuity and succession planning. And in fact, we're embarking on a journey of what I said a couple of weeks ago, of eternity. So this is something that we're working with our succession planning, continuity planning, our SWOT analysis, strategic business planning, our business reviews. All this is leading to the continuity of not only the business, but more importantly, their people. Because if we don't have this ongoing process, continually improving, continually assessing, continually looking at the what if scenarios, the unforeseen risks, and things like that, we won't be able to take that crunch.
Mhm.
Whereas if we put ourselves in a position of these, and again, they're very simple tools. Again, they're all available on the ACI Global website for them to upload and use. And that's why it is so important to understand this is a moving canvas and we have to be prepared to change.
Mhm. And that's a powerful takeaway, Ian. Because when we embed those principles, values, and culture, the strategy really becomes part of how the organization operates every single day, not just something discussed in boardrooms. So, thank you so much again, Ian, for joining us and for demystifying how organizations can elevate SWOT analysis into a meaningful process that supports enterprise risk management, people development, and long term sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miles. And for everyone listening, have a wonderful week. And yes, and we look forward to next week's episode.
Yes, same here, Ian. And for those of you watching or listening, if you'd like to learn more about ACI Global's frameworks and resources, you can explore their enterprise risk management framework, digital information security framework, and their compliance risk assessment tools directly through the ACI Global website. You better check out the details below because these resources will definitely help strengthen your governance frameworks, competence management systems, and continuous improvement programs. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in and spending time with us for another insightful conversation. Subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Spotify and Amazon Music so you never miss the next discussion with Ian and with leaders and innovators shaping the future of business. Until next time, this has been your host, Miles. Stay focused, driven, and inspired with X-Raced.